Welcome to Decentralized News, our weekly coverage of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, DeFi, and the macro news that affects it. Welcome in. This is Pyre DeVries, joined by my co-host, Ozzy. This is not financial advice. Please do your own research. Let's jump right in. The first story we have is from the block. Circle refuses to hold longer dated treasuries on U.S. default concerns. Yeah, go ahead.
This is pretty major. Crypto is losing confidence in the US and their ability to actually pay their money, pay on their debts. Isn't
Yes,
that such a big turn of face?
Yeah, it's kind of like a subtle macro news story. Keep an eye on macros. Oh, this is a little bit of a warning sign about the U.S. economic condition. But yeah, they're refusing to hold treasuries that mature beyond early June. And there's a reason for that early June, because it's like the X date when the U.S. runs out of money. But because the U.S. may default on debts, this is a quote from CEO Jeremy Allier. And he told Politico, "We don't want to carry exposure through a potential breach of the ability of the U.S. government to pay its debts." The Circle Reserve Fund, which is managed by BlackRock, show it holds no U.S. government debt maturing beyond May 31st. And while the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt, and the last minute deal is expected, we don't want to carry, we quote, don't want to carry exposure through a potential breach of the ability of the U.S. to pay its debts.
US
Democrats and
debt ceiling
Republicans,
is something that always comes up for the US because you guys are
right?
notorious for, oh, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling
Yes.
and then raise the
This is
debt ceiling because
it's a reoccurring story. Like it never goes away. But
every
it
few
seems like
years.
it seems like this one's got a little, sometimes they're not much of anything. There's always some sort of story around it, but this one seems to be gaining a little steam that it might be cause some volatility in the market.
Oh, it'll definitely cause some volatility in the market. You've got a market that's already weak. You've already got other governments turning away from the US dollar as a reserve currency, and then you've got the risk of the US defaulting on their debts. That is like a perfect storm for something to go wrong and for
Right.
something to slip. Like maybe they pass it at the last minute and they accidentally forget to pay one of their bills. Imagine that. I could see that with the US government.
Yeah. So we've entered this phase where we're in the special measures period. So the Treasury Department comes out and says, we're implementing special measures to extend the life of the money we have. And that is expected to not be able to do anything after May 31st. So that's where this kind of X date comes from. So they need to come up with something, or there's going to be some type of default somewhere. That's the threat. Like I said, it's never happened before. And the expectations are that they'll at the last minute even do something, but Circle's not taking any chances.
No, but that's a huge statement because basically companies, and who knows if maybe banks are doing this. Maybe BlackRock even suggests that they do this. And BlackRock's one of the biggest asset managers in the US.
There
Whole
and they
is what if BlackRock's wasn't a decision by the CEO of Circle, but it was a recommendation from BlackRock. And what if the bond market starts crashing because essentially they start big asset managers, banks start losing faith in US T-bonds and trust, like in US treasuries, because the government in the US is unwilling to properly manage itself.
well, most likely we'll see it calm down and Circle will eventually start buying them again. Most likely, that's the most likely outcome. But
Most likely scenario is your politicians stay up till 11:58 p.m. and
yes.
sign a new bill for the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling again. That's the most likely scenario, but I do see that the market could take a dip as we head into X date, just because of that uncertainty of what's going to happen.
Absolutely. We have some other news out of Florida. Ron DeSantis seems to always be in the news with crypto and Bitcoin, but the Florida governor signs a CBDC bill into law, restricting some uses of U.S. and foreign CBDCs. The new law prohibits the use of a United States federal CBDC as money within Florida's Universal Commercial Code. It also bans the use of CBDCs issued by foreign governments and calls on other states to use their commercial codes to institute similar prohibitions. And we'll update that in a minute. This is a quote from a lawyer, John Montague of Florida-based Montague Law. The bill stipulates that transactions involving CBDCs won't be afforded the usual UCC protections, potentially dissuading entities or individuals from engaging in such transactions with CBDCs. And also, we say that Florida has the authority to do this. And this is just me reading into, but what I saw when I was watching Ron DeSantis talk is that this law would apply to would not apply to a CBDC created by U.S. legislature, by U.S. law, but would work with a CBDC created by the Federal Reserve or Treasury or some department without a law enacted by Congress first.
Yeah, it's interesting that all the little nuances of what this could mean, but it's a very strong stance, although
Sure.
it's not exactly as clear cut a ban on CBDCs as he might state it is.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's the end of the fight. I think it's to imply a
Oh,
little bit, but
absolutely.
it is a very strong stance. And it seems like his words were heated. Texas, while they haven't passed it, just introduced a bill to ban central bank digital currencies. So it argues that retail CBDCs are issued to the general public, establishing a direct relationship between the Fed and the consumers. This could lead to unprecedented levels of government surveillance and control over private cash holdings. This is in the state where they have a senator who, on the federal level, introduced a bill in March to ban the Federal Reserve from adopting a central bank digital currency as well. Texas seems to be with Team Florida on this one.
It's very much in line with their stance up until now. They're pretty pro decentralization and pro crypto. And so I would say that their stance is not surprising. I'm waiting to see it for sure pass, but I don't see why it wouldn't in Texas.
It's interesting. Texas, whenever the talk of state secession is brought up, as states seceding from the United States, Texas is one of the first ones that's brought up. Like they potentially could just be like, "Oh, we don't even want to be a party anymore." They're that independent.
Yeah,
Independent.
I could believe that.
Yeah, just like in terms of the vibe of Texas in the United States, they're always brought up first. It's like they might be down, they might do it. In world, looking at the little broader around the world, there's a story out of Russia. Russian companies are actively using crypto and Russia to adopt 4 relevant laws in their coming legislative session. The State Duma, the lower house of the Russian parliament, plans to adopt 4 crypto related laws during its spring session, which ends on July 30th. This is according to Antilov Askayov, chairman of the Parliamentary Financial Markets Committee. The 4 laws will address regulating cryptocurrency mining, cross-border crypto payments, which they say is happening, but they want more.
Regulatory
Yeah,
clarity.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're kind of already going forward with that, and taxation of digital assets, and then what the liability for their illegal use or the punishment, what actually are the punishment. I thought that was just a little follow-up. We've been following Russia. It's an announcement about an announcement, but it just reminds us that they're already actively using cryptocurrency for trade settlements and that they're moving forward to make it even easier to do, it looks like.
I think this kind of demonstrates how the rest of the world is actually moving on crypto and the US isn't. If we look at the fact that the EU has passed their own pro quote unquote crypto regulation, or at least crypto regulation of some kind. Hong Kong's getting ready to pass theirs in June.
Sure.
And now we've got Russia talking about passing 4 new laws regarding crypto before July 30th. We're seeing everyone except the US to some extent, at least in the major world, talk about passing crypto laws and passing crypto laws. And so
The quote
US is
unquote
really
comprehensive legislation. So it's just, we know what's the playing field look like so we can start to operate.
exactly. And so this is now looking more and more like the US is falling behind. What's like if someone can go operate in Russia and know how to operate legally, don't it makes that mining story make just that much more sense that you talked about last week, where they thought a bunch of miners were going to move to the US to Russia from the US, and
Oh, and you were, yeah, I can't see that, but yeah, maybe.
if they're going to pass laws about it and
Yeah.
Russia potentially gives them access to cheap electricity,
I mean,
then
you know what you're getting into at least.
yeah, and you know what you're getting into, then you know what? Maybe you just might operate in Russia. Would
Be
make
willing to sell your miners over there. Why not?
it might make more sense than operating in the totally unclear world that is the US right now.
Well,
Canada's not
speaking
much
of,
better with their talk
yeah,
of a CBDC, but and
yeah,
some strict regulations on apparently exchanges, but
yeah,
no real
but I
clarity on
mean,
the rest of it.
in the end, all these coins could be called securities. It seems to be drifting in that direction, but it's still a little unclear. And yeah, Binance, a couple of the other exchanges, they're making moves. I think we'll get to that story. But also around the world, speaking of other countries that are pro, El Salvador has been very pro Bitcoin, obviously, and the U.S.'s stance towards them. So top senators, this is the name of the story out of the Washington Examiner. Top senators take aim at El Salvador Bitcoin adoption over national security risks. The legislation specifically mandates the Department of Justice, State Department produce a report spelling out the risks of cybersecurity, economic stability, and the democratic governments in El Salvador that its adoption of this Bitcoin cryptocurrency poses. This is a quote from this is a bill sponsored by both Democrats and Republicans, which just shows when it comes to national security issues, they will get together. Given U.S. interests on prosperity and transparency in Central America, we must see greater clarity on how the adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender may impact El Salvador's financial economic stability, as well as El Salvador's capacity to effectively combat money laundering and illicit finances. So yeah, they just want to keep an eye out on them, but it's almost like with a negative connotation. They're like looking for what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, it seems to be trying to poke a hole in why.
Let's collect our facts for why we can FUD this.
Yeah, exactly. How can we FUD Bitcoin and the use of Bitcoin in the US? It's ridiculous. But
A little, just for fun, we'll give Nayib Bukele. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. He is the president of El Salvador. This was first introduced last year. This bill is just making its way through the legislature and it's getting mentioned again. But last year, when this was first introduced, the president said the US government does not stand for freedom. And that is a proven fact. So we stand for freedom. Game on. And he added that Bitcoin is FU money.
I love it.
So,
That's pretty strong statements. And it's very interesting that I know on other shows that I'm on, especially the Obsidian the Obsidian Council's show Consensus, we were talking about division of party lines right and left around crypto. And this is a bill that's introduced by a Republican.
by both, it was co introduced, Democrat and the Republican.
Yeah, at least the quote is from a Republican.
Right.
And so it shows it's not as clear cut as sometimes we like to make it seem that it's Republicans are pro crypto and Democrats are anti crypto. So
There
something to
is,
consider.
I think there is something to that personally, but when it comes to national security, that is one thing where both sides of the aisle, when it comes to the military spending and stuff like that, they hold hands and say, go for it. No holds barred. We can take away freedoms for national security. We can, that's probably how they'll raise the debt ceiling.
National
Like,
security. Yeah.
yeah,
There'd be a
it's like,
massive revolt if they start
it gets
defaulting on their debt.
in terms of the legislature and watching them be bipartisan. That is one thing they will be bipartisan. But on the more positive note, I don't know if you remember Bitcoin Beach.
Yeah, not Crypto
Okay.
Bros and the guys have been talking potentially about going to Bitcoin Beach this winter.
So Bitcoin Beach was just took donations. They were trying to make a circular economy in a small little beach town. And this became the inspiration for the president of El Salvador to make it legal tender. So there's another project in Guatemala, which has a ton of unbanked people. So a use case for Bitcoin and this alternative just
Payment
as money,
source. Yeah.
as other money, but it's located in Pana Chachel, Guatemala, but it's the Bitcoin Lake, launched just over a year ago. The project aims to create a circular economy similar, powered by Bitcoin. And they successfully onboarded more than 60 merchants, and 90% of them are unbanked and solely accept cash or Bitcoin. So they don't have anywhere to put the money. They take the cash to. And then it's connected to El Salvador as well, not just in the narrative, but El Salvador has a program, my Premier Bitcoin, where they're doing education programs, and they're starting to do that in other countries. And one of the first course offered in Guatemala, I think they're one of the first 5 countries to have courses out of this, is in this area.
Yeah.
So that's the cool story. Maybe some more adoption coming in South America.
If we start seeing more of these little towns do make that move through education and through seeing like the success of
Yeah.
Bitcoin Lake and Bitcoin Beach, you start
And
seeing,
grassroots, decentralized, grassroots, peer to peer.
yeah, why not? It's a very easy, it's a low hanging fruit in some ways
But
for this
also
to be able to happen.
it's a potential use case that can't be stopped. If individual areas want to use it, it's hard to stop, because of the centralized nature of it. Especially these people are already unbanked, and I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting to watch this play out.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a story to be remembering and keeping an eye on. And we're seeing it slowly but surely, especially in South America. And hopefully we see some more adoption throughout the world. Maybe we start seeing it in Africa. That would be really
Yeah.
cool. I think Africa is probably your other major untapped, unbanked market. And so them being able to hold Bitcoin, and we're seeing Nigeria being a major adopter of crypto. And so seeing them adopt Bitcoin and see towns in Nigeria just operate on Bitcoin would be a major step forward for the argument around cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's like in America, we don't have the unbanked problem. So we perceive Bitcoin in a completely different way. It's
It's
more
more of an
like a money.
investment vehicle in the US,
Yeah. It's like
whereas
money going out. Yeah.
in the third world per se,
It's more
it's
necessary.
it's a solution to a real problem.
There you go. Yeah.
That being
All right.
said, it's not all
Yeah.
sunshines and rainbows.
Yeah. Go ahead. It's Canada. What happened up there?
Going after my heart here, Binance is calling it quits in Canada. Binance has been my exchange for essentially my entire crypto existence. I've used it. Was found to be the easiest way for me to onboard onto into crypto. They're calling it quits in Canada because Canada announced kind of new rules, but didn't really pass a law. It was just using existing rules and guidelines to basically say how crypto exchanges and trading platforms would have to operate in Canada, and with a whole bunch of limitations. And it essentially has scared Binance out. They tried to find a way to make it easy to comply, but they couldn't. And they're not the only ones. Bittrex also left Canada last July. So we're seeing exchanges, just like they're fleeing the US, they're also starting to flee Canada. And that's not a good sign.
You know why I'm
Diverse.
excited?
Why?
It's going to make you more. It's going to make you more of a maxi, because in this whole story, I knew I had to find the good news for you. But there's this thing called Bull Bitcoin Exchange. But we'll talk about that a little bit. But the rules define stablecoins as security. Yeah, like all these pairs and all these other altcoins that are paired to what are now they're like saying is security, I guess, is just too much of an issue. And it's just really, in terms of crypto, it makes it really tough. But because of the rules that they have, you can buy Bitcoin with actual cash or your debit card. So you're not using a stable coin as long as it's less than $1,000. You can go to your local post office in Canada and buy Bitcoin, no KYC, sent directly to your wallet as long as it's under $1,000. That's because of their rules. Like, it was over $1,000, you got KYC. So I thought that was pretty cool. You can go to any post office. That is neat.
That is very cool. I'm gonna have to see. I've got a post office 5 minutes from here. I'm gonna have to check
For
that
only
out.
Bitcoin. Sorry, I think I just yelled in the microphone.
Yes, you absolutely did. I could totally potentially go buy some Bitcoin that way. That would be really cool if that's the case. I think I would totally confuse the poor attendant working at my post office. They're not used to this kind of thing, but I might just try. Next show, we'll check in and see if I had a chance to go to my post office and try it. But that's awesome. Super easy. It's one of those things where it's right in their own platform. Like, it's somewhere where people are used to buying things, just like PayPal, which is going to be talked about in a couple stories from now. Buying where people are already familiar makes it easier onboarding. But we're seeing NFT sales surge over 31% this week because Bitcoin NFTs are taking off. They are now second place in blockchain sales, which is absolutely crazy. But over $53 million in sales, and it clinched the second position out of the 21 chains that are currently tracked. They leaped over 187.54% compared to the prior week. ETH still had double the number of sales for that period, but for
Might
ordinals being a new
eh,
thing, that was awesome. They're beating Solana now. That's major. Solana was always considered to maybe be that new emerging NFT space, but based on this, it's
it's,
not looking that
it's
way.
as fast as it's growing, it's 2x away. Not hard to imagine at this point.
No, and with them now also being accessible on the Binance Marketplace, that just allows even more users to access them because the
Yeah.
Binance Marketplace, NFT Marketplace, allows users to buy and trade those ordinals from their Binance account without needing a hot wallet, which a lot of people are worried about having hot wallets. And so that is major.
And this follows OKX, adding ordinal support, and marketplaces like Magic Eden, widening the adoption of ordinals. Yeah, it's hard to see it shrinking unless the devs do something, because there's a bit of a debate about whether it's good or not for Bitcoin. But development seems to move slow. But there are some interesting critiques of it. One, there's the rising transaction costs and slower speeds. The other is it doesn't follow the overall mission from Satoshi. I don't know that we can speak for Satoshi of just the peer-to-peer payment mission that we were talking about earlier. But this was the interesting part that I thought the developers of the standards and the tool are not affiliated with Bitcoin. They are anonymous and the software has not been thoroughly tested. This is from a executive that works with development. I forget the exact executive, but he also believes that ordinals could cause ordinals and the BRC20 tokens that have spawned from it too could cause additional regulatory scrutiny, which I think is a fair critique, and they could be considered unregulated securities. I thought that was an interesting take on the possible downside.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very fair downside. So we're potentially seeing a great volume for Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners getting more rewards, as we've talked about last week, and potentially offering flow and transaction fees that would be still interesting for Bitcoin miners. But I think the problem is the fees and the speed slow down so much, then
Yeah.
it doesn't make it interesting for peer-to-peer or the bankless population because it gets too
Right.
expensive.
They'll be forced to wait for Lightning adoption, which will be slower. But yeah, supporters say that tech provides more opportunity, improves decentralization, also ensures freedom of speech because you can inscribe things permanently onto the blockchain. And this was another interesting take on it, but it forces development on that scalability issue you're talking about, that as adoption just for Bitcoin as for transaction as money increases, this type of slowdown was always going to be coming anyway. It just forces the issue of something that was going to need to be solved anyway. I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Yeah,
What are you going to do about scalability?
yeah. I That's a great question. And but no one can really control that because the base blockchain is all controlled by it's Satoshi. So I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah, I
everyone's
mean,
thinking about.
yeah, it's basically it's an ongoing debate. It hasn't been settled even within the community. So it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward. There's two camps forming, but Bitcoin's been able to work through issues like this in the past. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, we'll see how it pays out.
But speaking of networks with issues, Ethereum network suffers a second finality issue. ETH suffered a technical issue on Friday, causing its network to halt finalizing blocks for more than an hour. It didn't shut down everything. It just wasn't finalizing. You almost don't notice it. But the second issue of its kind in a 24-hour period on Thursday, blocks were being proposed but not validated for a 25-minute window. The cause of these outages still remains unclear, but it's not a good look for the network. But it's up and running again, and users and developers are on alert and watching. I saw something about a patch in between the two, but it's a little over my head, so I don't want to comment too much on technically what might be wrong. But certainly like a little bit concerning. Be watching for more news on this one.
Yeah, hopefully we don't start seeing issues with Ethereum.
Or issues they can't resolve.
Yeah. Hopefully they can fix it and there's nothing groundbreaking that needs to be completely redone because that
Yeah,
would be
it's epidemic. Yeah. But at
wrecking.
the same time, there's strong demand, right? So strong demand for ETH staking leads to a near month-long wait for people wanting to create a node. So ETH holders have to wait nearly a month before they can set up a network to be a validator on Ethereum. There are 50,000 validators waiting in queue. It's taken like about 25 days or something like that.
Yeah, so
I
that's
thought that's kind of interesting little note. At first, there was a lot of people pulling money out, but a lot of it was just people testing that they could get the money out and then they're just putting it back in, and probably new market entrants as well. A little bit of both maybe, but they're not just taking it out and selling it. It looks like.
no, we're not seeing massive selling. So I
Yeah.
think that's major. And it kind of talks to what is coming up next, which is Lido, which is working on basically a vote to deploy their version 2 on Ethereum. Lido is probably the largest, if not the largest, liquid staking platform for Ethereum. And it's voting to basically pass its first version update since it was originally deployed. They had to, it was only a vote for participating Lido token holders, and they're calling it the most important upgrade to date because it introduces two new features. The first one is to allow the implementation of withdrawals within the staking router proposal, and it's also looking to increase the decentralization of the network, which is allowing Lido to be more healthy, allowing people to stake and unstake at will, which is reinforcing the value of STETH. Because previous to that, you could only swap STETH for ETH, so staked ETH for ETH within the liquidity pool. And now it allows people to have liquid and easy movement in and out without needing to have a buyer and a seller. So that would be incredible for the Lido community and a huge step forward for ETH staking.
Yeah. So this is it looks like it's going to pass. Most participants voted to deploy it when this article was written, which was a couple of days ago, but it's supposed to deploy today, I think right away on the 15th if it goes through. So keep an eye out for it. I'm curious how it looks because you can technically unstake by just selling back the ETH, but now you can stake and unstake at will within the protocol. So it'll be interesting just to see subtly what that means overall. But yeah, it seems to just overall improve the flow and the ability to move it around. So that was
Yeah,
pretty good to me.
no, that's pretty cool. And it's just amazing to see like something actually stay working and moving forward.
I like the whole idea of Lido because you don't have to have 32 ETH and you can earn some of these rewards. I'm wishing them the best, but a little leery. There's still risk involved with you using You basically just have another layer of liability with Lido. But I'm attracted to the idea of earning yield. So just for holding and getting 32 ETH together is not on everybody's table.
No,
It's
that's
an
about
potential opportunity.
$60,000 at current prices.
Yeah, if I want to be at work, I'll be keeping an eye on this one. It doesn't seem to be going away. It's getting bigger, Lido.
Yeah. And then I think the last major story, without diving, without downplaying the other two that we've got lined up, is PayPal users hold nearly $1 billion worth of cryptocurrency, mainly Bitcoin and Ethereum, but also a whole slew of other cryptocurrencies.
I think it's just too much. It's Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin. Don't quote me on that, but I think they just have a little bit of, I think that's the four they trade in. And it's just a little bit in those two. But yeah, it's like mostly Bitcoin and then a big chunk of ETH and a little bit of those other two. Like a majority Bitcoin, not mostly.
We're
Majority.
talking almost $500 million in Bitcoin, 362 million in Ethereum. So essentially, you're talking $861 million in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and so just about another 80 million in other cryptocurrencies.
So this came out in an SEC filing. One of the other things that they mentioned in the SEC filing is that they use a third party. They didn't mention who the third party was to hold their crypto assets. I thought that was interesting, but not your keys, not your coin. And I looked at the SEC filing and it says this quote exactly. We utilize one third party custodian. As such, there is concentration risk in the event of the custodian is not able to perform in accordance with our agreement. So there's still some risk there. And just the fact they hold that much. But these are, PayPal is kind of like ease of use. Maybe people still learning about the blockchain and don't really maybe realize how much, if they have a significant amount on there, that it is a little bit at risk with the bankruptcy. Remember the Celsius court filing? If you don't hold the keys, you may not have any rights in the bankruptcy filing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a significant risk, as
Billion
just as
bucks.
risky as any exchange, and it's why the fact that they introduced the ability to withdraw from PayPal is so important.
Yeah.
Because not your keys, not your coins.
Yes.
Yeah, the concentration risk is major for PayPal, but it's also major for anyone who is using it as an onboarding platform. I have found a new onboarding platform outside of this new Bitcoin Bull exchange in Canada, and I'm just using it for easy onboarding and then using it to offboard. I'm able to withdraw directly in my wallet. And so I think that's really important to consider, especially as we're still seeing exchanges file for bankruptcy. Bittrex filed for bankruptcy, and we talked about this as breaking news in the last show. After SEC charges, they'd withdrawn from Canada last year, and they're now filing for bankruptcy in the US after being charged. And they're estimating that they've got about 100,000 creditors with between 500,000 and $1 billion in assets and about the same in liabilities. So it's not that they've run out of money. It's that they're essentially trying to protect themselves from the SEC while handing back assets to customers. So that's...
Yeah, it was interesting when this story broke, it didn't seem to shatter the market. And then reading a story,
see why.
Yeah, it was a technical move. It's like basically this is already agreed upon, it seems, and they're just using the bankruptcy filings in order to unwind the company.
Yeah, and so they can withdraw from the US. Binance is doing something different with leaving Canada. I got an email from them because I'm a Binance customer, and essentially I've got till end of September to basically to close my positions, and my crypto will still be safe there, safe, quote unquote, and I'll always be able to withdraw, but they're recommending I withdraw before September 30th. So it's good.
It's good to have a date and know what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At least
Well,
there's
the
some
final
certainty.
story, yeah. And in our final story is first kind of, I've heard of this, something called the Canton Network. It's not the first I've heard of something like this, but there's a company called Digital Asset and working with leading market participants and with the names of Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, to their plan to launch the Canton Network. The Canton Network is a decentralized infrastructure that connects independent applications built with their DOML smart language contract. And it's for institutions. It's offering the privacy and controls required for highly regulated organizations. I'm imagining like deeds, securities, derivatives, stuff like that. Gives a couple of examples here. An asset register and cash payment system are distinct and siloed system in today's market. With Canton, a digital bond and a digital payment can be composed across two separate applications into a single atomic transaction. But anyway, it seems like they're trying to use the blockchain technology to streamline their operations, but also keep it secure, but also private and centralized. So they have control of it. Okay.
Yeah. It's super interesting to see. And it's not really a blockchain if it's centralized, like they're talking about. Like Goldman Sachs, Microsoft. You're
But they
talking about the
call it
banking system.
decentralized infrastructure. So it's like they're using blockchain. Yeah. But it's almost like just for the transactions, but they want to keep it in-house.
Yeah, they
But
want to make
they
the
seem to have a
rules.
lot of control.
Yeah. They want the control. They want to essentially use the tech and call it decentralized but they really want to maintain the control and maintain the power.
And they have a lot of currently they have to comply with all these things that they necessarily cannot do on an open blockchain as it stands now.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit of that too. Is to use TradFi as it exists, we almost have to create like a separate blockchain in order to make it work. That's not open to everybody.
Yeah, which just doesn't.
It's not the dream.
No, it's not the dream, and it's not what crypto's about.
But maybe one of the roads it's going to take future as this environment unfolds.
Yeah, I hope not, but you're right. It could be.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Decentralized News. We post to YouTube first, so please consider subscribing to catch the videos as soon as they drop. Our goal is to provide unfiltered content that help foster genuine discussions and help this entire space grow. Please remember, this is not financial advice. We are not financial advisors. This show is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research before making any investment decision. Thank you very much for your support and stay tuned for the next episode.